It's already recording, huh? Hi, everybody. I'm going to get started because it's 2, and in the interest of just using our full hour to our advantage, if you are on your computer screen or on your phone, you can see to the right, there's a chat screen. And if you open that up, I put in a couple of things that might just help make it a little bit more effective of a webinar for all of us. And one is, if you're not talking, to use your mute button. That just saves us feedback and conversations that are happening. I know you're all at schools, so it's not a library probably. The whole point of this conversation is for it to be a conversation, not a tutorial or a lecture about how to do this the best. It's about sharing best practices and learning from one another. So if you are having difficulty with your mic, or if you are in a space where you can't speak, please feel free to use the chat function. I will steer the conversation as best I can and make sure everybody's included. I really want this to be one where everybody's participating and feels like they're getting the questions and answers that they're looking for while we're here. If you have any resources that we refer to here, if you can link them to the chat, I am collecting them all from our 3 webinars today, and I will send them all out to all of us at the end of the day. And it's already becoming a robust source of just different topics. The first 2 webinars this morning have gone in completely different directions. Very interesting how the conversations go. So I'd love to do that, to share all those resources. The last thing is that this conversation is shaped by 4 framing questions, which are: what are we doing to support your student activists currently in this immediate wave of activism? How do you ensure that all activism is supported, not just this one outreach about gun control? And how can we help students develop these skills in their traditional academic experience? And what are the challenges that arise with this work? So I would ask you all, when you speak, to introduce yourself and say where you're coming from. The best part about my organization, I guess I should start with myself. I'm Blake Cohn. For those of you who don't know, I'm the executive director of the National Network of Schools in Partnership. We are based in DC. We're a national organization that serves 150 member schools, public, private, and charter schools, talking about how to improve and enhance community engagement and partnership programs in our schools to better develop critical character skills in our students. And student activism is one of the ways in which we do this. So if you would introduce yourself, it would help create a better sense of a network, so that you know that you have a team of people here that you are working with and that support you and are open to our challenges, our hurdles, and our successes. So that being said, I'm going to start with the first question, which is: what are you currently doing in your schools to support this immediate wave of activism? And how does that look at your different schools and your age groups? Because I'm imagining there's people from K to 12 here on this conversation.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, this is Jennifer Ford. I work at Greensboro Day School, and we had a conversation last week at lunch where we invited students to come and discuss the latest events, but to also invite a peer that has different thoughts and beliefs than they do. We are being really careful. We probably have as many students who believe that teachers should be armed as we do students who believe that guns should be abolished completely at our school. So we're really trying to balance the voices and encourage student activism, well, not to encourage student activism, but if activism occurs, so that students know that it doesn't have to be on one side of a fence or the other.
And how do you, I'm sorry, how do you navigate, sorry, Laura, how do you navigate those conversations with your kids? Do you have students who are, you're K-12, right?
We are K-12. This was just for our upper school. And so this was upper school students, and it really started through casual conversations that I hear outside of my office, and invited some kids and then let it grow. We had a proposal for a walkout. And so that was a place for us to start to talk about that. It was all student driven. I don't think it's something that we would have started if students weren't interested.
Right.
And as far as the nitty gritties about the conversations, I think we really tried to, we've been working to establish some clarity around dialogue principles and accepting non-closure and really learning to listen to each other instead of listening to respond.
Right. Good. Those are good things. We could all learn those.
Yeah.
So Mark is saying he agrees with you about trying to find a balance between providing opportunity for activism while not making it the school's activism, and trying to make space for all viewpoints as a safe place. And I'm assuming that's a challenge for everybody. And how, as adults, you navigate your own personal opinions with the activism that is going on at your school. So one of the questions that has arisen in the past webinars is, how do you navigate the age ranges for these discussions? How do you decide which kids are included and which kids are shielded from these conversations?
Yeah, I can jump in. This is Laura Day. I'm the Director of Service Learning at the Hockaday School in Dallas, Texas. It's pre-K to 12th grade. And and just to follow up on the opening question, because I think that helps as I'm going into the question you just said. What we did is very soon after, we gathered all our 9th grade together, 10th grade, 11th grade, and 12th grade. And then people who were skilled at having conversations like this were put in each room with everyone's advisors. And then we had kids write on this is just an idea, write on a Post-it note a word to describe how they were feeling about what was happening, crumple it up and put it in the middle of their small groups or in their advisory, and then read the words as a start. And then we only asked them very simple questions. What have you been hearing? What are you feeling? And we front-loaded with the community norms, as well as that it wasn't going to be a political conversation. This was going to be about how we're all feeling and more of a conversation, so that way we're processing this in our school as opposed to like on Twitter or something like that. And so we had that for 2 hours or an hour and a half a couple weeks ago. And out of that, students have wanted to do walkout on both days, which we're supporting. And I've been in the conversations with the students who are wanting to do that, and what we've turned it into, as opposed to them walking out and against, about doing any sort of political thing, we're having them all walk out, and then we're inviting groups to run voter registration, letter writing, and you can do whatever you want on your letter. We're going to make quilt squares and sew a quilt together that we're going to send to Florida. There's going to be all of our political groups are going to be there talking with their adult sponsors, all student run, but all about like a call to action as opposed to political, more of a, you want your voices heard, let's give you a place to do that during these walkout days. We're not doing that in middle or lower. And we're trying, lower is not really talking about it, and middle isn't talking about it here. It's just upper.
Laura, there's a question about, what do you mean exactly by supporting the walkouts? What does that entail at Hockaday, your, quote unquote, support of the walkouts?
So the 10 a.m. on those days, we're going to allow students everyone really, to miss class and to leave the class, and then outside we're setting up the tables with all of the different ways they can get civically engaged. All student run, but adult supported. So that's what I mean, I guess, in the sense that we're not telling them not to, or we're not telling them whatever. We're helping them kind of channel this passion into a way that they can be more civically engaged.
And is there pushback from any of your families or your board, or, or anybody? Are you receiving any pushback on that?
We are not, and we have not, because it hasn't gotten political.
This is Stacy. I'm the Dean of Equity Education and Social Impact at Castanea School in California, in Palo Alto. One of the things that has been really interesting to us is our student leaders have made it really clear that if they walk out, they want it to feel like they're walking out of something that they want to engage in the act of protest and civil disobedience. So what we've tried to do, and we're doing this with our middle school too. I mean, we have school, so we're a 6 through 12 school. We have, we have rules about signing out. And so we've sent a letter home to families that sort of talks about the 4 ways that engagement's going to happen. The opening paragraph, and this went to students too, but with student input, is really about, that it's a Howard Zinn quote, sort of democracy being, protest being the bedrock of democracy, which is apolitical in the sense of like, whatever you're protesting, that's neither here nor there. But then we've laid out for students, like, if you want to protest, you can sign out, and there are no penalties. So that for us, supporting means like teachers are going to give makeup tests. If students miss things, then they're going to be given the opportunity to retake them, remake them, whatever it is. School goes on as usual because that's what the students actually want. They want to be inconvenienced by the act of protest. That said, most of the protest takes place during our break time because we have break at 10 a.m. So we just, they'll depending on when they decide to come back, it depends how much class they miss. But we've also offered them the option during break of a school supported opt-in, walk around on campus. Like, we have signs, place where they can make signs and things all week. We have teach-ins around thinking about gun violence. So there's something they can do on campus if they want. If they want to walk out, they can sign out and be excused. If they want to walk out and not be excused and not sign out, then that's their business. And then they'll deal with the consequences. But for some of them, that feels really important to do it in a way, they're taking a 60s course and they're reading about the civil rights movement, and they want to live their values and take a consequence for it. That feels more legit to them. And then the other thing we've done is continue this notion of thinking about gun violence and a space to talk about it during the walkout time, if kids prefer to do that. So we've sort of offered like this smorgasbord of options, and we haven't had pushback yet, but I don't anticipate too much. This is California, but and most people are pretty supportive of the walkout. But I think either way, we've tried to not depoliticize it, but not also turn it into a school statement on a specific set of values.
Nina, you wanted us to talk about middle school, so I'll direct to you with your perspective from middle schools.
Sure. Hi, everyone. So my name is Nina. I am the service learning coordinator at Georgetown Day School in Washington, D.C., and I'm the lower middle school coordinator. So similar to, I'm trying to think who was speaking before. I think Laura, when you were talking about the work with high school, lower school I think we're also trying to figure out the best way to address and support students with several walkouts happening, and especially here in DC, there's a lot that's in the works. For middle school students specifically, there was a walkout that happened, I want to say last Wednesday, that several of our high school students were involved in, as well as middle school students, because actually it was all student led, it was student driven. Several students actually they came to me, they came to other teachers, they came to administrators and said, hey, we want to do something. And I feel like the school stance was, you have every right, you know, if that's what you want to do, that's how you want to be involved, that's fine. Our school administrators released a letter just saying, you know, if you do decide to participate in this way, you know, you have to, you know, let us know, you have to sign out. Because again, we're talking about middle school specific. So middle schoolers were allowed to, if they wanted to walk off campus, of course, they need to get parental permission. Often parents were coming to pick them up to take them, you know, downtown and do what they, you know, and go do the walkout or participate or to go with a, you know, friend's parent, what have you. We just had to be able to account for them before we could let them leave. It's a little bit different than our high school students. We have an open campus anyway. And I can't really speak to how our high school handled that. But there has been a lot of discussion about supporting kids in whatever way they wanted to engage. Because several of our kids wanted to engage in, again, not necessarily making it a political issue, because we do have kids, you know, all, you know, along the spectrum. We did have kids who were, writing postcards to elected officials on that same day that people did walk out. And that was supported by an adult. You know, we found representatives' contact information, whether you live in DC, Maryland, or Virginia. And, you know, we had teachers writing, and again, from different stances. So everyone, you know, some folks are like, I'm a teacher, I don't want guns in my school. Like some of our teachers were in there writing along with the kids. Others, articulating their views maybe on, you know, on different sides of the spectrum. But it's been an ongoing conversation, and we're definitely trying to hear how other schools are handling this and approaching other ways to just engage with students. But a lot of it has been in response to our students coming up and saying, we want to do something. Like we feel like we're not happy with how things are going. We feel like it's one-sided, no matter where they fall, right? And all of the national debate that's happening. But those have been the two main things that we've been engaging with.
So Nina, what grades does middle school start? Is it 5th grade or 6th grade?
It's 6th grade at GDS, so 6th, 7th, and 8th. Yeah. And
have you had any pushback from parents of 6th graders where they think that they're too young to be having these conversations?
Not that I've heard, not in my role, not that I've heard. That doesn't mean it hasn't happened. I will say that the administration, they did put out a letter to parents ahead of time because they knew kids were talking about it. So, and because there was already so much buzz, they just said, if you're okay with your child participating, specifically with walking out, then we have to have your permission. You know, just like any time that they're leaving campus, you know, they have to have permission. They have to be with an adult or, you know, have some kind of plan. But no, I think, and again, at our school, it's part of, you know, we have we're very social, you know, social justice oriented school. So I think parents kind of expect that and would probably be asking us, so what are you doing to support kids who want to do something? But also a lot of, and kids do know that they have a responsibility, just like Stacy said, that if they do, you know, if they are missing school will continue to go on. You know, we're still having classes, but, you know, if you're going to be out, just like if you were sick or you had to miss for a holiday, you know, just make sure you check in with your teachers and, you know, make sure you're on top of what you need to do. So, yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
In your middle school, are they having, are you having conversations in class or in, like, how are you structuring conversations for them?
So, great question. That's one thing that I personally need to follow up on to hear more about. There have been conversations in advisory periods. Some students specifically, because I'm the service learning coordinator and have been in the midst of planning some service learning days coming up, I was asked if we can make this a project. I suspect that some of our kids are going to try to start their own club, just to kind of, to not just talk about what's been happening related to, recent violence and gun control and all the different views, but just doing sustained action. So whether it's like letter writing or educating ourselves or bringing folks into the community to kind of educate us more. But I'm not sure right now what other structured spaces there are for conversation, because we're also, I know administration is still trying to just get more information about plans for more marches that are being planned in the next few weeks too. So yeah, to be determined.
Cool.
I'm wondering if I could, excuse me, if I could chime in here. My name is Diego Duran Medina. I'm the Director of Service Learning at the Shorecrest School in St. Petersburg, Florida. So this issue has hit us pretty close to home, and thank you for organizing this. We have actually taken the approach of, while it's important to think about the issue around guns and sort of how the young people are talking about it and how we're framing the conversation, I consider this a moment to actually think more broadly about what this means for how we talk about activism, how we teach activism, and it's something that I've actually been working on for a couple of years. I used to work at the Edmund Burke School in DC, so I know the work of GDS pretty well. I think for us, we started asking questions around if a student wanted to be considered an activist or if they wanted to exercise these skills, what spaces in our school would they have an opportunity to do so, especially in the upper school, which for us is 9th through 12th. We've been supporting a student who wanted to start an activism club, which for us in a traditionally maybe a bit more conservative place, I think is a pretty big deal. I think it's also about language. For some schools, it might be about activism. For other schools, it might be current events or debate or whatever it is, although all those are slightly different. And then the last thing I'll say quickly is that I think it's really important to talk about how we bring this into the classroom. And I think there's an interesting question there. I've heard two ideas that in some ways oppose each other, which is, as teachers, we leave our values at the door. We don't bring those into our classroom. We are these kind of neutral beings, and we just teach, and we're not there to indoctrinate students. And yet, I think we very much are supposed to be teaching these specific skills around citizenship. And we want to let students know that we care about things as well. And if a student asks me, I'm going to be honest about how I feel about something. So I've always thought that those two notions are very interesting and how they kind of sometimes crash against each other. But the bigger idea is, I think, how do we create academic spaces where we can have this kind of conversation? And the reason I say that is, when you consider the students that are leading this charge from Florida, they were trained in how to do this, and maybe not specifically on activism, but they were theater students, they were journalism students, they were debate students. They had learned how to frame these issues in a way that made sense, and that is in a way that is engaging, and they're really well informed, and that's because their school offered those spaces to develop those skills. So I'll stop right there, and again, it's nice to be talking to everyone.
Cool.
Thank you, Diego. I think that's great. We were talking in one of the earlier webinars about these opportunities that were presented to these kids out in Florida that really help prepare them. And that is always a question for us. And when we're talking about community engagement and partnership work, is how do you get these opportunities embedded into the academic day so that they're a shared learning experience for every child, and that they're not considered an extracurricular or an extra add-on activity. So that leads perfectly to my third framing question is, like, how can we help students develop these skills within their current academic day? Or how are you trying to embed these values, these what I call critical character skills, into their everyday academic experience, so that every child that graduates from your school is armed with these skills to allow them to be activists?
I think it's this is Laura again. It's such an interesting question, only because, like, we have programs that are kind of teaching the ideas of activism, but the students that actually came out of wanting to organize at our school are kids who aren't in those worlds. So it's kind of interesting. So I'm saying this as like a, what do people think? And to kind of go with what Blake's saying, like, I'm meeting with them at lunch, at conference, because I was a community organizer in the Bronx for a long time. And so I'm just like teaching them, how do you organize? But I'm doing it like in any gap I can find, and it's just the kids who've like emerged as being interested, and doesn't happen to correlate to the kids who are doing a program that I'm teaching this in. So it's kind of interesting, like, how do you catch everyone, how do you catch everyone? How does that get integrated? I don't know. I'm doing it during advisory or, like at lunch, or I don't know.
Yeah.
Stacy had mentioned on the chat, she had to sign off because she had to go to another meeting, but she said it's important to frame for students how to protest or make signs and what to say. And those are things that where does that come up in class, right? How to use your language. And we talk all the time about shared language. It's a good time to introduce kids to this notion of language and what's appropriate language to use when you're making signs for a protest. And I think that what Laura was saying about finding all those little pockets of time, and the webinar at noon where somebody had asked if there were any schools that had any specific activism classes, right? Is there a school that has a curricular class about activism? And the one that came to mind is one out of Penn Charter, which is a school in Philadelphia. It's a Quaker school. And they have, it's a social, curriculum about social justice, civil rights movement, and how activism comes to be. And it's a 2-semester opportunity. You can take first semester or second semester. And then there's also one that leads into Philadelphia specifically, about what is going on in Philadelphia and how they can see things that are need improvement or that they would like to be active about, and take their skills and do such work. But I don't know of other ones, if anybody's aware of other classes like that.
So this is Steve McManus. I'm the upper school head at Friends School of Baltimore, and maybe it's a Quaker school thing. I see Deborah there. We have a class almost very parallel to what you were describing. It's Peace, Nonviolence, and Social Justice. First semester, second semester social justice seminar, and it is precisely a sort of lab field work experience where students together with their teacher decide on an issue of social justice that they wish to disrupt. They've done health inequities in Baltimore. They've done inequities in public education. They read This Is an Uprising, which I don't know if people are familiar with the book, which talks about how to become agents for change in peace and justice. And I think Quaker schools, it's when we live our mission. We don't see that as something that is tangential or relegated to club life or extracurricular or just kind of organically wait for it to happen. It's something that we really believe should be embedded in, at least in the upper school experience for every student. So it's with any of these sort of, being change agents in your world, in your society, it has to be lived and it has to be practiced. So having those offerings is really important for us.
And what age group is that available to?
That's open to upper school students. 9th and 10th graders tend to not have room in their schedule for those electives, but juniors and seniors certainly do.
And that's the exact title of the school at Penn Charter. I don't know if it's a Quaker component, but that's exactly what it's called. So I just went back and looked, and I can share their description in a minute from Penn Charter's website. I'm sure Friends School of Baltimore, you also probably have it on your curriculum guide. But I think that's great. I think anything of those sorts really helps kids. But I'm curious if, like Laura mentioned, that the kids that are really active currently are not those kids that have sought out these opportunities prior. Is that true for other schools? Are you finding energy and engagement from students that you had not prior seen? And if so, how do you harness that in those particular kids to keep them engaged and to sharpen these skills?
I have a question that is kind of parallel to that. This is Jennifer at Greensboro Day School. I'm hearing the same voices over and over again, and I'm trying to find ways to get the voices I'm not hearing. And that's our big concern with if a walkout happens, there's lots of voices, and the kids often feel like their voices are the minority, so they can't share it. And I'm trying to find ways to have them feel comfortable sharing their voices on campus as well.
That's a great question. If we're going to practice our Quakerism, and so I'm just going to be quiet till other people participate. Okay, really, I'm not a good Quaker. We know this. I know this 100%. This is not my skill set. Okay, so what's how do you ensure, and that was my second question of the four framing questions, how do you allow the minority voice to have rise, whatever that voice is? And we saw schools come up with that a lot after the election, where there was a lot of empathy for people who were disappointed with the results of the election, at least in the schools that we work with, for the most part. But then there was a need for the faculty to step up and support those who felt shamed for being happy about the outcomes of the elections. And so how do you give voice to something where you, as a faculty, you might not agree to that voice, or that they don't feel like they have a place in a school that might already otherwise be seen as liberal or democratic or what have you? How do you give them an opportunity to feel comfortable and have a safe space?
So one of the things that we, I think you've described very accurately, something that at Friends School of Baltimore, we have long had a sort of tradition of politically conservative voices feeling silenced, diminished, marginalized, out of the mainstream. And in many ways, conservative students at Friends School of Baltimore anyway, almost function as a cultural affinity group. It is not an identifier in the traditional sense, but in many ways they inhabit their conservatism as, a cultural affinity group. The Director of Diversity, Equity, and Social Justice and I do affinity lunches with groups of students that, we have them throughout the year. If you can speak from the I perspective of students of color or LGBTQ students or neurodiverse students. And one of those sessions that we have every quarter is politically conservative voices, and inviting them into a place where they feel they can have their voices be shared and heard before they move into a larger space. We have a practice in our school also called Collection, which is our gathering of the upper school community that we do almost daily. And Collection is a place where we're invited into, courageous conversations about a variety of topics, apolitical, and we reserve at least one or two of those collections a year for our politically conservative students, just as we are hearing from other clubs that should be a place where the community can hear those voices as well, not as something that we're preaching or you have to believe this, but Collection for us is a place in the school where we can hopefully hold some dissonant voices and reflect on them together. But it's bruising work. It really can be fraught with feelings of I don't belong, I don't fit. In a classroom discussion, my conservatism is the lone voice in a class, and I don't know if I think that's something we've always kind of struggled with. So I don't pretend to have the answer, but I certainly am always looking for ways to have that be something that students can learn to navigate better.
in the walkout on April 20th that our students are organizing, which I was so proud of them, one of their first thoughts was to have the young Democrats, the young Republicans, and the young independents having a table at kind of the main place of where all the students are going to congregate, with adult help, but being able to provide kind of what the politicians that they're representing would be supporting. So then students have the ability to kind of go to where they belong, kind of talk, learn what's going on, and then go and be register to vote or write a letter or whatever. So that way there's some sort of a little bit of ability to let students have choice, which was a great idea the students had, I thought.
So I wonder what other conversations are being had to include other students' voices and to encourage them to be active on their, okay, let me reframe this question. How do you encourage activism without having it be your school that is being the activist? Because certainly you don't want to come out saying your school is supporting X, Y, or Z, but you want your kids to be choosing things that are important and passionate for them and that they see injustices in or what have you. So how do you navigate that line at your school?
I'll speak on this. I mean, it's actually part of what we've promised to do. So we go back to our mission. In our mission, there's a line that says we develop socially responsible citizens. I'm sure that every person in this chat, I would hope, has some line either about service or social responsibility or citizenship within their own mission. So I think that helps in framing it to the parents. I think it helps in saying that these are skills that aren't only used for activism, but are just part of skills that you need as a human being, as an American, as an informed American, as somebody who hopefully votes. So I think we very much frame it within our mission. And I guess the interesting work is in how we carry out that mission. But by framing it directly to the mission, I think it automatically sort of surpasses some of the critiques of why are you teaching this to my child? What does this have to do with, you know, academic learning? Why am I paying for this?
I often think that K-12 schools have an easier time because they get parents when they're young. I speak mostly from my own experience as a parent of a kindergartner or a first grader or second grader where I didn't really know what I was doing. And so when you send them to school, you're entrusting, you've made this choice that this is how your education is going to be guided by this educational institution. And so if you are confirming these values in K 1, 2, 3, then by the time the parents are in 8th, 9th, 10th grade, they all understand that this is part of the whole education that is important for them to get. I feel like you're not, I mean, I'm sure you all know this, you're not just teaching the students, you also are doing parental education.
All of them, and I pulled Axiom and double checked each one of them in Axiom.
Okay.
Muted myself. Sorry, I just muted myself. So anyway, I think that's great. Diego, I have a question. What other things do you do in your school that support this work? Like, do you have other classes? Do you do advisories? How do you do professional development for your teachers?
Right. Yeah, great questions. Because I think especially that last one is part of the challenge. Is I'm not sure that we do a great job of preparing adults to talk about this, because I think we tend to teach how we learned. And so one of the things that I talk about a lot is how do we frame civics? And, you know, civics for a long time has meant you vote and you sort of follow the rules and you're a good citizen and you salute the flag and you don't kneel and all these kinds of things. So that's part of the question. I've always, whenever I've taken a job at an institution, I've said, I have to be in the classroom. And so I've brought this class with me, whether it's been called activism or social justice or citizen engagement, whatever it is, I sort of couch it to fit whatever environment I'm in. But I think, again, like I said before, trying to create an academic space for this that is beyond social studies, that is beyond history, I think is really important. It borrows from those things, but it's different. So we have a space where students, it's only one semester, but for 16 weeks, students can explore what it means to be
headphones?
a citizen. Sorry? Hello? Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that was a question. The second thing, real quick, to professional development, we just last year started an institute called the Center for Service Learning Leadership, where we're actually trying to think about these issues. So we worked with 9 teachers last year to talk about not only service learning, but how do you frame these conversations in a much broader sense so that we're really talking about civic engagement. So we're trying to do our small part in also helping teachers develop the language and the skills. So whether it's an individual class or what most people will do is a unit or something within an already existing class, we try to give them the language so that they can have these conversations. So if a student says, I want to be active in this way, the teacher is able to support that. And so we think about, okay, beyond voting, most of our students won't be able to vote until they're either seniors or they're out of our care, right? So I don't think voting is the only way that we should go on this, so that they can be supported by that teacher.
So how do other schools approach this notion of empowering your teachers to facilitate these conversations, whether it's in a structured environment or just as an advisor or a mentor or a support system for an individual student? Do you have a way to support your teachers that this is an expected component of their job, and so here we're going to give you some of these skills to facilitate these often tricky conversations? Nina, do you guys do advisory? What do you do in the middle school? Do you have an advisory program?
Yes, we do.
And what kind of professional development do you do before sending your advisors off with their topics that you cover within advisory?
Right. So I know, and I'm not an advisor, but I do know that there's some kind of professional development that they tend to do over the summer that does some framing of the advisory program. And as you were asking the question, I was thinking that there are times when we come together as a staff and we do, actually no, two things come to mind. So I can't speak to the advisory program specifically, but I do know that there is some kind of professional development that our advisors do go through at least once per year. During faculty meetings, which we have almost weekly. I'm not exactly sure how they're structured, but I want to say at least once a month, I feel like we're doing some kind of interactive sharing, or we're looking at case studies related to supporting student success. So whether it is about learning differences and remembering where our kids are developmentally, especially, I'm thinking like middle school specifically, we do a lot of this. We also have, this year they've just started with something called GDSU, which is like an internal professional development series where we do a lot of professional development, which I think is great, but the school came to the realization, or always known, that we have a wealth of experts just like within our walls. So really, they put resources towards our own teachers, teaching about different things, whether it's project-based learning or ensuring that our classrooms are more equitable. And basically there's an expectation that if you're not leading a course, you are participating every semester. So those are two ways that we try to give teachers some more opportunities to learn from each other and to just kind of hone their skills. In terms of ways to support students having these conversations, I do teach a section of a social justice seminar course that we have for 6th grade. So back to your question about what have 6th grade parents what have their reactions been to this idea of like student walkouts and activism and everything. We're talking about social justice issues in 6th grade as well. So, it's definitely part of the mission of our school And the way that we've been framing a lot of those conversations is based on like the big 8 social identifiers, you know, so and like we'll do like as deep of a dive as we can. And of course, they are very much related to what's going on in the news. So, you know, we're hearing how people are talking about different identifiers and how that relates to students' lived experiences and that kind of stuff. But advisory program, I could do some research and get back to you, but I'm just not sure specifically.
And so the final question of the 4 framing questions are, what are the challenges when thinking about supporting these student activism, and specifically around the walkout on the 14th, et cetera, this most recent wave of activism, but in general, what are the challenges, and what have you learned through your experiences that you could share that might make it easier for other schools to navigate these paths in the future?
It's interesting because I would say that our challenge is what everybody was just talking about, is that we, I think, put advisors and teachers every time we do this in a position, and we haven't done, I don't know, I mean, we aren't training our advisors and our teachers to have conversations around like current events and these kinds of things. So I think one of the challenges for us is how do we, as much as possible, make our teachers or advisors feel comfortable. There's some of us who feel comfortable, and there's many of us who don't. And so I think that can be a challenge.
And Laura, you mentioned when you were facilitating those conversations, you took teachers that were skilled in these conversations. Are they skilled just because you recognized them in their experience?
Yeah, like our director of inclusion and community, and our, you know, people who are already kind of leading conversations around all kinds of things, like people who've done that before, but then they did break up with their advisors in smaller groups. And I can imagine that without much of a heads up, because we had to be pretty quick on it, there were teachers they're glad they were having those conversations, but I think they were also uncomfortable.
I think one of our concerns is how we do allow our upper school students to kind of follow through with their activism without disrupting our lower school, since we are a pre-K through 12, in ways that our lower school faculty aren't necessarily prepared to manage. And so I've been trying to encourage our students I don't want to run their walkout, but just for them to think about safety, for them to think about impact, things that we all hope teenagers will get eventually, but we know they're not experts at right now. And so that's a concern for us. We happen to have a matinee of our lower school show going on that starts at 9:30, and the actors want to walk out, but the lower school students will be there. And what if everyone has a break and there's upper school students protesting, and then the lower schooler goes back to their teacher and their parents? So we're trying to encourage the mindfulness of our adolescents kind of beyond themselves. But I am open to whatever other suggestions people have with regards to safety and community impact.
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the frameworks that we look at is how can we use what we already are doing as opposed to creating new programming, because resources, time, attention spans, and so one of the things that we're working on in its work is trying to move from a community service model to a service learning model that allows our faculty and our students to begin asking kind of deeper structural questions around why the service is needed in the first place. Because I think that in some ways that's the very first step towards activism. So when you not only ask the what, like what is the need here, but why does the need exist in the first place, or why is the need there? It's just one word, but I think it's an important turn for a lot of our students to think about. There's much bigger issues at play here than just a food drive or a gift drive or these kind of community service, charity, fundraising type of things that we tend to do a lot as independent schools.
Diego, we need to talk more, because that's all we do in my organization. is help schools take wherever they are on this community service to service learning, and we say you're pushing it towards community engagement and partnership, but help them
Yes.
take what is already present and push it towards the engagement part of the continuum. So
Great.
after this, I'd love to connect with you at a different time to talk more about it.
That'd be great.
If that would work. I'm conscious of the time, and I'm also super grateful for your time. So I would like to take this opportunity. Does anybody have any questions or something they're grappling with that they'd like to take the opportunity to ask this group before we sort of wrap up? I appreciate every minute that you've spent with us, and I think that we could talk for a very long time about how to best support our students in this. I think we've only just barely scratched the surface. So I'm going to leave this a minute for you guys to ask any questions or share anything that you think might be helpful to other people in this conversation.
I would say that this is just a thought. There's a cool workshop that Teaching Tolerance is doing, one in March, one in April, and one in May in different cities. It's a one-day workshop about how do you teach and use, like, act quickly to current events. I think it came out of what's happening right now, and they're teaching a one-day workshop, and I'm going to go to it, and it looks really cool. So I just thought I'd say that if people are interested in that.
I'm going to one on Saturday, so I'm hoping it's going to be good.
Two organizations that I think are doing really good work around these topics and related topics. Facing History, Facing Ourselves. I'm sure people have heard of them. They do a good job of kind of connecting this to the past and in ways that social studies teachers can really engage in. And then Generation Citizen, they're a national organization. Their work is focused on how to engage young people through civic engagement. They have curricula and activities that that can be implemented pretty quickly.
That's great. And to follow up with the Teaching Tolerance, in one of the previous webinars, we were talking about their standards for social justice, which start in kindergarten and go through higher ed. And that I'll post a link to all of these tonight when I send the resources around. But I think this is one of the greatest parts of having these conversations, sharing these resources. Is there anything else? I'd love to know, like, what's the takeaway from our conversation today? What are you thinking about? What might you try at school, or what are you just sort of working on that's been taught today or talked about today?
We have a winter term, like a January session, just about 2 weeks. And I think I want to borrow Steve's social justice class and shrink it down and offer that this coming winter. It could be fun.
Yeah.
I think for me, just the power of connecting with other educators that have sort of similar challenges. I think in some ways this work can sometimes feel a little bit isolating or isolated, and so I guess part of my question or question attached to that would be if folks would feel okay if we kind of compiled people's contact information. I know that we're going to share resources. Maybe that was already the plan, but I've tried to write down kind of who's on this call. Would it be possible to kind of know and see everybody that's been involved with the webinar if they choose to be identified?
In my least technologically advanced part, I'm certain you'll be able to have all of their emails when I send out the email, because I won't BCC everybody. But along those lines, I'm happy to connect you with anybody you'd like to, specifically with this, with these webinar groups. I think for the most part, everybody is happy to be connected and share resources and have increased conversations about this stuff. So I'd be happy to help with that, and to also regroup maybe after the 14th of March and see how everything went, so that maybe we can all learn from our lessons for the next great big walkout. And Stacy had suggested that we create a space to share photos, and it had come up earlier as well, that showing your students, other students their age that are sort of activists and heroes in this work, and really doing, I mean, I would say these students from Florida would be right up in that category, really is inspiring, more inspiring than historical figures of activism for them, to see their peers really doing hard work. So I'd be happy to create a space in Dropbox or Google Drive where we can create an album, and then we can load it up onto our website and share it with everybody. It'll be on all of you to have permissions for your kids, for your photos, but we can cross that bridge when we come to it. So anyway, I really thank you guys all for being here. Does anybody else have something they'd like to add as their takeaway?
I would just also like to echo, I really appreciate the opportunity to learn from you all and to meet you all virtually. Would love to stay connected. The thing that I'm constantly thinking about, and it's been mentioned a few times, is definitely engaging all of our student voices and making sure all of our students are feeling supported and cared for, as they're really trying to navigate a lot of, stuff that's can be hard for us, even to wrap our minds around so much going on in the world. So I also think about our students who feel like they're in the minority often in my school, whether it's politically or just kind of where just who they are, how they feel, what they're believing in, wanting to lift them up as well. So I'm very much interested in other resources and strategies, especially for like my younger students, lower and middle school students, especially. I do know we do have some spaces for them in our high school, but I'm thinking about my younger students who are already starting to see, well, I feel like I'm different from other people in this way. And we're like, and that's great, and that's great, but how do we continue to lift you up as well? So, yeah.
She's not going to say it, but Laura Day, who's on this conversation, is her K-8 program is exemplary at Hockaday. So you two should talk offline, and just share everything she does. And that's true for lots of schools. San Francisco Friends School as well. Guy B. Slangen is there. He's the director of community engagement. He also has a fantastic K-8 program. And actually that reminds me, before we all hang up, if you're in California, is there anybody here? Mark's in California. In San Francisco, I am at Cathedral School for Boys. We're doing a regional meeting on Thursday from 9 to 11 about purpose and helping students find their purpose to have them be more engaged in learning. So if that is of interest, I see DC and Dallas and Greensboro. No, that's my invite to you. The registration is on our website, but if you just show up, you're more than welcome to just show up. It's 9 to 11 on Thursday. But you can email me and I will send you the details. Okay, I am conscious that it's 3 o'clock. I really appreciate you all taking the time today to have this conversation. I also really like direct feedback about how we're doing this programming. This is a little new for us, these webinars. So if you could just send me an email with if you have any constructive criticism or how this could have been more effective, or what have you, I do appreciate that. And I will, hopefully tonight, if not first thing in the morning, send out the list of resources along with a contact list of the people that were participating today. And as always, reach out and let us know if we can help you all at all in this work. So thank you guys, every one of you, for being here. And I hope to see all of you soon. And I will talk later.
Great.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.